Hello everyone, and welcome to my bonus training for WP Central Hub. Now the purpose of this bonus training course is to, number one, teach you how to use this plugin, but then more importantly to teach you a little more in depth about what it can really do and what it can't do, and how you should be depending upon it in the future for building your WordPress sites, no matter what kind they may be. Now initially, the number one thing that you need to understand about this plugin is that you have a parent site, and then you have all of the rest of your sites as children's sites. Well, your parent site is where you will actually be controlling everything from. So this will be the normal WordPress dashboard that you would log into to then be able to manage all of the different sites that you have set up with this plugin. So the first thing that you need to do is to essentially determine which site of yours you want to use as your parent site. This can be just simply one of your active WordPress websites, or you could set up a brand new site that doesn't even really have to be an actively used website, and you can kind of make that your hub for everything. It just kind of depends on what your personal preferences may be. So to show you what I'm talking about here, I'm actually going to be installing and getting this plugin set up on two websites for you today. One will be the parent website and the other will be the child website, so you can see exactly how this works. So to start with, I'm on a site that I will make the parent website here. You simply go into WordPress and add a new plugin, and then you're going to be uploading your plugin into the system. Well, the plugin that you download, you're really getting two different plugins here. One of them is titled WP Central Hub. The other one is titled WPCH_child. This is going to be for your children websites, and the one that's simply titled WP Central Hub will be for your parent website. So for this site, I'm going to be selecting the WP Central Hub plugin and getting this installed. So you simply install and activate this just like you would any other plugin in WordPress. Once you have it set up, you'll see down here in the sidebar, you have a WP Central Hub menu now with a couple of different links to go along with it. On the main page of this here is where you will manage your sites that you add. However, obviously we don't have any sites added in yet, so we can add them in either through this link here or through the Add Sites link in the sidebar. However, before we actually add a site, we need to get everything set up with that child website first. If you go to the child plugin link, you have a couple different parts of important information here that you need to pay attention to. Number one, you have the link for the child plugin. If you don't already have that, or maybe you lose it in the future, you can always come back to this site and download that child plugin so you can set it up on additional websites. The other parts here, though, you have this information that you need to set up both on the parent website and also on the child website to ensure that these can connect together properly. One of the things is an API key. This API key is actually something you are going to be creating yourself. It can be any combination of letters and numbers that you want to use. Just think of it as like a password. You can do something fairly short and simple, or you can do something really long and drawn out like this. Ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as the same information then goes into your child plugins that you install. You're also going to need this IP address right here from the parent plugin. So I'll take a notepad file and just add in the API key and the IP address for the parent site, so I can then easily transfer this information over. But if I ever needed to access this again, all I have to do is come back to the parent site and go to this child plugin link, and I can find this at a later point in time. Now, another part that I'll come back to here in just a moment is the time offset. You need to pay attention to this time here, and then also the time that is given to you on the child website. Because if these times don't closely match up, you have to adjust them to get them to match. Otherwise, the plugins won't be able to communicate with each other. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my child website. This would be simply another Amazon site of mine that I want to have linked into this whole network. I do just like I did before to go and install a new plugin, except this time around I'm going to be using the child plugin. So now that this is activated, you get a sidebar menu item that says WP-CH child. So I'm going to click on this, and you can see here on this page how it's really very similar to the previous page that I was looking at here. So this same information, my API key, is going to go into the API key box here. And then for the site IP address, I simply transfer this over as well. Now the time part that I mentioned to you, you can see down below here the time of this website compared with the time of my other website. However, notice that the time isn't going to be updating itself automatically. What's really going to be happening here is whenever you first come to this page or reload it, the time will update. So you can see right here, the time just updated for me. So if you either refresh both of these pages at the same time or come in and save some information like the API key and the site IP address, you'll then get a refresh on both of the sites at a fairly similar time. And what you really just want to do is make sure the beginning parts are essentially matching up. If the minute is off by 1, take a look at the seconds and see whether it's really more than a minute off. For example, here, mine is at 23:09:19. And the child site is at 23:09:30. So that's only a difference of 11 seconds, and the difference is actually because I simply refresh these pages at a slightly different moment in time. So the point of all of this is to make sure that the actual server time on these two websites are matching up with each other. If it is not, you can make an adjustment on the child website right here, plus or minus a certain number of hours or a certain number of minutes. Now, since WP Central Hub can be used on websites that are not located on the same server, this kind of a thing actually is possible to run into. But if all of your sites are on the same server, you're likely not going to have to even worry about this at all. All of your sites should automatically match up then because they are running at the same time, which is server-based and not website-based. So with that said, once you have your information entered in and you submit it so it's saved into this child plugin, as long as then your times are matching up correctly, you have nothing else to do on the child website in terms of getting this plugin set up. Everything else would then be done back on the main parent website now. So now if I go back to the WP Central Hub main page here, I can either click on the Add Site link up in the top or also in the sidebar. They both go to the same place. So all I'm going to be doing now is typing in the name of my site and then typing in an address for it. Now notice that you want the URL to not have a trailing slash. That's referring to the slash that is sometimes on the end of your website. You don't want that to be there. Just look at the example right here, and you kind of want to follow that format. So have the name, which is just for your own reference, and then the URL, and then click the Add Site button. Now when we go back to the WP Central Hub main page, our site is actually listed here. This now allows you to manage this site, or you could obviously continue on and add as many sites as you want to this same network. But the real question is, what is this plugin going to do? Why should you add all of your sites to it? And exactly how should you use it going into the future? The biggest advantage that I personally find to this particular plugin is the management of my software. You have 3 different kinds of software basically that are running on these websites. You have WordPress itself, you have plugins, and then you also have themes. Well, any of this software gets updated to new versions, and when it comes to the plugins and the themes, you're often mixing and matching different software depending on what you're trying to do with a given website. So on one site, you might want to use only a couple of particular plugins, but on a different site, you might use a completely different set of plugins. Ultimately, though, you kind of have this plugin and theme library, most likely, from all of this software that you've picked up over the course of building these websites. So what I really like about WP Central Hub is how you can load all of your software into just one of your WordPress websites. And then in the future, you can easily load this up on any of your other websites with the simple click of a button. And you can again do all of this from the main WP Central Hub page. Now, part of the software aspect to this, I obviously have a normal WordPress site running here for these 2 separate websites. And if I go to the plugins page on these 2 separate websites, they each have their own unique plugins that are already installed on them. That's another thing that makes this plugin really useful, is that it's not just for new websites. You can use this with your existing ones, and it's not going to mess up anything. You're not really changing the website at all by incorporating this plugin. What you're doing is you're giving this parent website the ability to do a lot of actions in bulk across all of your sites, things that normally would take you a lot of time to do, and they're just time-consuming, busy work type of activities. So, for example, you pick up a new plugin that maybe has just been released, and you want to go and install this on your Amazon sites. But maybe you have 20 or 50 or even 100 different Amazon websites. Going through one by one and going up to add new and uploading all these plugins is going to take an enormous amount of time. Well, with WP Central Hub, you can simplify all this by simply going to your parent website. You go to plugins, you install that plugin as normal. However, it doesn't matter whether the plugin is actually activated on the parent website or not. That's kind of one of the more important parts to remember about the way this whole thing works. If your parent website is an actively used website, if it's just one of your Amazon sites that you're running, for example, you wouldn't want more software loaded up on that site than you're actually using, because it can slow down the loading time of the pages on your public site. So you don't have to have all that stuff activated. You just simply have it installed. And as you can see, there might be a number of plugins here that I have installed on this site, but they're not actually active on the site. So this software doesn't get loaded up when pages on this public website are being loaded by people that are viewing my site. However, by that software simply existing in this main site system here, then WP Central Hub has access to it. So what I could then do is take my new plugin, put it on my primary website, just like I was mentioning before, and then I can either go to individual websites and click on the little plugin link right here. I can see the plugins that are already active on that current site right here, so I could deactivate things if I wanted to. But then I can also choose from all of the installed plugins on my current website. And I can choose one or multiple of those plugins to install, whatever the case was going to be. So let's say I wanted to install Combazon on this extra website. I can just click on Add New Plugin with that checkbox selected there, and it will automatically install and actually activate this plugin on my child website now. This kind of brings me, though, to another part that is worth mentioning. Whenever you are installing plugins like this, while you are getting that software installed and activated on those additional websites, seem to be having some kind of an issue. Try this one more time. There we go. I was going to say it shouldn't take very long to do, and I've used this a number of times already. That error that just showed up for me, I haven't personally seen that one before while installing these plugins. It looked like there may have just been some kind of a hang-up with web communications. For example, these two websites of mine are on a shared hosting account. They're actually on the same shared hosting account. And it's with HostGator. And for example, on those types of accounts, my account is limited to 20 requests going on simultaneously. So, you can sometimes reach instances like that where it just simply can't make those communications go on. I see. While you're installing, what if you have errors coming up when installing? That's a good question. If you are back on the WP Central Hub parent page right here, One of the easiest ways to tell if this is actually working or not, if it's connected to your other site or not, is to look at this WordPress icon right here next to whatever new site you have just installed. A lot of times when you first reach this page, I've noticed that the WordPress icon will show up, but you won't see the little number next to it indicating the version of it. If you refresh this page and you still don't see this number out next to it, then there's likely simply something wrong with the key and the IP address that you have entered in. If it's still not connecting up, it's likely because of a mismatch in time. From what I have learned about the plugin and how this timing mechanism works, basically if it doesn't match up within a minute, it's designed to not process old requests, and I guess it's also a security aspect of it as well. In terms of if you had errors when you were simply trying to activate the plugin, you'd probably have to contact the developer, Edwin or Mike, about any of those types of errors, because that would likely be some kind of an issue with server configuration or something, seeing as how the plugin definitely activates correctly without any kind of an errors on at least the majority of websites. I haven't had any kind of an issue as far as getting it activated or installed. The main thing though I'd watch out for is just make sure your API key and your IP address is matching, and then if you're not getting this to match up, if you're not getting the version number to show up in this list here, then it's simply not connecting up, likely because of the time. There could be some other possibilities. There are certain servers that prohibit communication, for example, between other websites or external URLs or something. You're welcome. Not a problem. So now once you get a lot of websites added to your network, it becomes a lot more useful in terms of installing a new plugin on a site. For example, I can add my new plugin onto the main site. I can do then the bulk adding of a plugin and simply install it in this manner and just select all the different sites that I have on the network. And then you can install one plugin across as many sites as you have connected to it all at one fell swoop. And the same thing kind of goes for themes. But the part that I guess is important to understand about the installation of the plugins and the software like that is you're not necessarily going to be able to completely avoid use of your other websites in terms of using the administration areas to do particular things on your site. One of those things does relate to the installation of software. For example, when you install a new plugin, you then might need to go into that plugin and add various types of settings. Like a lot of my Amazon plugins, for example, you'll have to go in and put in your affiliate ID and your API keys and information of that nature. So you would then have to go between each of your different sites to actually set those plugins up on each individual website. So unfortunately, it can't save you all of the time possible in terms of getting that software set up, but it can help to save you at least a lot of that initial busy work. And it can also help you to manage your plugins. If you want to deactivate a plugin quickly across a lot of sites, you can do it through this panel here. Personally, I don't find the settings link to be horribly useful. It really just seems to activate the initial page of the settings, the general page that you see right here. And even then, you're not necessarily getting all of them. It would be cool if they could expand WP Central Hub a little bit to incorporate more of those settings over at least the default pages that are built into the WordPress system. So in terms of managing the settings and stuff like that, it's not going to be crazy useful. However, if you're like me and you have a whole bunch of these WordPress websites, you kind of reach a point where you might not even be sure what your login information is on particular websites anymore. You have it stored into your browser, or you might have a notebook or something like that, like I do, with just endless lists of login information. When you connect up a whole bunch of websites to WP Central Hub, one of the coolest things that I like to do is to then go into the bulk actions and add users. And you can actually create one user account and have it across all of these different websites. Simply set your role right here to administrator if you want this to have the normal privileges that your typical login information would have there. And then you can simply have one standard set of login information that's going to work on any of the different sites that you have. This has actually been a lifesaver for me already because of the simply enormous amount of sites that I had. I seriously had some websites where the only way I could get the login information for them was by digging into my Firefox browser. You can actually pull up the listing of your saved passwords and stuff like that and force it to show you the actual passwords. I've had to do that kind of stuff just to recover a password and be able to get into a website before from a different location, for example, my laptop if I'm out of town. So this way you can go in and kind of unify your login information across all of your websites. And even if you end up not keeping WP Central Hub installed and connected across this whole network, this kind of stuff still works. Whatever you have done with WP Central Hub in terms of setting up these users or installing the software, all this stuff then remains. So while you won't be able to access everything across these different websites, there are certain things that this plugin can do that I've just never seen done any other way. That's a good point, Ran, and I do not believe that would be possible. He's asking, what about hackers? If somebody's hacking this site, can it get access to all my sites? Oh, you mean if they were to hack your primary website, you mean? Oh, I got you. They likely would. Just like, if they actually could get access to your primary mother site's dashboard, like this here, they would be able to access WP Central Hub in this manner, just like you would be able to. Yes, just simply ramp up your security for the primary website. The most important things, I guess the number one and the number two things that you could really do to worry about security on your mother site, at least in my opinion, you want to make sure you have secure login information, obviously, have a complicated login username and login password. You can also use stuff like Captcha Plugins. They have free Captcha Plugins that you can find through WordPress. Just go to Plugins and Add New and type in Captcha, CAPTCHA. There are obviously other security plugins that are out there. Some of those will kind of monitor the base files of WordPress to make sure they're not modified and things of that nature. Ultimately, though, if you're sticking with the most recent version of WordPress, that can have a big effect on it too. People will discover security vulnerabilities, and once it is publicized and an update gets released for it, especially in WordPress, then anybody still using those older versions becomes much more vulnerable. Personally, anytime I've ever had a WordPress site of mine hacked into, it happened because I simply didn't update WordPress on that site, and it had an old version that had known vulnerabilities, just sitting out there waiting for somebody to take advantage of. Now, if you're ultimately super concerned about something like security like that, you wouldn't necessarily have to keep all of your sites connected. If you wanted to use this for a very particular purpose, such as when you're creating a brand new website, for example, you're going to have likely a specific set of software that you want to get set up on that new website. So you can set up WP Central Hub as a child website with that new website. Then you come back here, you find your website, you set up your plugins and your themes, and then you can actually remove that connection if you really wanted to. You obviously wouldn't be able to come back here at a later point and install a new plugin across all of those sites or use some of the other features that are available, like managing the users and stuff like that. Right. Basically like a master bank for your new installations. Keep like a software library all on this one website. And then so instead of having to go in and upload 10, 15 different plugins or whatever to a new website you're setting up, you just go in here and check all of your boxes and all that software will be installed. And then you just go to your new site and could start managing it and getting it set up from there. Now you also have a system here that allows you to publish content to your websites. If you click on the right button for an individual website, you'll see the standard WordPress editor show up. This is useful on one hand, but on another hand, I do see maybe a little bit of functionality lacking here, just depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with a page. I think the Amazon affiliate sites are a good example of this as well. If you notice on this website here that I'm currently on, I have Fresh Bundle Master installed, and you can see the icon for it. When I go into the editor here to post something, I get the editor that's on this website. It's not necessarily going to incorporate the software that you would have on that other website. On this other website here, I actually do not have Fresh Bundle Master installed. And in fact, if I'm in my editor on this other website, certain kinds of pages that I'm creating, I wouldn't really be able to completely do from this area here, simply because I don't have access to the plugins that are on this website here. My plugins, for example, they use icons up in the top like product style to insert and add into your post. Well, you don't get this up at the top here. Even though I actually do have product style on both of these sites, there is no PS icon up at the top here. And even if I were to incorporate this, I could certainly try to force my product style icon to end up in the toolbar here, just like is done with Fresh Bundle Master. Even if I were to do something like that, it would be using information from the ads from this primary website here. And it would put that shortcode into the page, but then ultimately on my other website, that shortcode would not function anymore because it would then be looking at ads that are on this site instead. So with that said, you do want to be careful about how you actually use this system to publish new content. If you're building a product review page where you wanted to put some Amazon affiliate ads on there, you would likely need to be going to the actual website to create that content. However, you could be creating the basic content through this system here, as long as you're not trying to include the extras such as your Amazon ads. So this is really more useful for informational based posting, blog posts, and things of that nature. In terms of using this on a bulk scale though, they have this very similar page where you can bulk post and you can then choose the websites that this is getting posted to. There could be a lot of really great uses for this type of stuff. Just it's going to kind of depend on what kind of websites you run and what you use WordPress for. As an example, if you run any kind of a membership site or a website where you have some kind of a community, even if it's just free members of a website, and you're maybe updating them with content in a members area of a website on a regular basis, you could actually be running multiple of these member sites and making the same post to each different one, as long as they were, still in a relevant category. In terms of actually using this to try to bulk publish content for your average Amazon affiliate site, though, you're likely not going to make a lot of use out of it. They do have this interesting system that actually allows you to build in content spinning into your postage you're writing here. But I'm personally not a very big fan of actually using content spinning, simply because I don't feel like it's something that's really tricking a search engine. And ultimately, you're not saving yourself an immense amount of work by creating a big, in-depth article that can actually be spun in a whole bunch of different ways. Now, what I kind of mean by that, let me show you how this spinning thing works. If I were to want to try to build a series of websites, let's say I want to build 5 or 10 different Amazon websites, and on all of these sites, I'm going to basically promote the same product. But the niche that is really centered around those websites might vary from one to the next. For example, you have a lot of products that could be used in a whole bunch of different ways. I could have a computer and I could sell it to one person as a gaming computer. I could sell it to another person as a work computer so they could do video editing. I could sell it to yet another person as just a casual computer to have in your house to log into Facebook with. pretty much any kind of product out there is going to have all of these different uses or purposes or different ways that you could go about targeting them. So it is possible that you could try to use this system for saving yourself a lot of work with building your product pages across a lot of these similar websites, because you would basically have the same products being promoted on those similar websites, but you wouldn't necessarily want the exact same content on each of those pages. So, as an example, I could have a page that is reviewing a particular computer, and I can write out my normal article review of that computer. I'm not referencing any real computer here, technically, just making a wild example. I could say something like, the Dell computer has superb memory and performance for any kind of use. I could have as big of an article as I wanted about this review, and then I can come back in and modify the article using spinning. Spinning is where you would take either entire sentences or phrases or even specific words in your content, and you provide alternate versions of them. Then when the posts are actually getting published, those alternate versions are chosen at random, and the result is a whole bunch of different articles, and they're all unique, at least word for word unique. The downside of that is you do kind of end up with articles that are still essentially the same. They have the same meaning. A lot of them end up with the same basic keyword phrases and stuff contained in them. So I don't really think it's a method of fooling search engines. But if you do need to create a lot of content in bulk and you wanted them to at least have some kind of a variation to them, and especially if you were going to then have other completely unique non-spun content for perhaps the informational pages of that site, and then you funnel traffic in from the info pages to your product pages, then the content on your product pages becomes much less important if you're not depending on that for your traffic. So what you can do for spinning is you put brackets around the word or phrase or even entire sentence that you would want to provide an alternate version for. And then you use your straight up and down line. It's, I don't even know what they call that symbol, honestly. It's, you hold your shift button, it's directly above your enter key for your backslash button. So shift backslash will give you the little straight up and down line here. And every time you do that and then type another word or phrase, you're giving another alternate version. So here I have the Dell computer or PC has superb memory and performance. I could also replace this entire phrase right here, memory and performance. I could say RAM and storage capacity. I could even do more than one type of replacement. To the point where there's more than just two choices. There could be 3 or 4 or 5. However many you want to put in there, you simply just separate each of them like you see here. You can also, like I was saying before, do entire sentences where instead of doing individual words or phrases within this sentence, I could have replaced the entire sentence and just modified that exact sentence. So if you were doing this on a sentence by sentence basis, and all of your sentences had different variations to them, honestly, in my opinion, that's how you're going to end up with content that is unique, at least as close as you can possibly get to it. You still might have a random sentence or two that occurs on multiple pages when you're building content like that. But ultimately, if you were providing enough examples, you would end up with pretty unique content. The question is then really a matter of, are you really saving time by writing out all these different examples, or would it simply be easier to write the articles, unique content, and just do a whole bunch of different articles on your own? With this particular sentence here, if I were to have this software create a post using this sentence, but I created the post on 3 or 4 different websites, for example, each time it reaches one of these little replacement areas here, it'll randomly pick one of them to show. And so I would essentially end up with sentences that looked something like these 3 sentences right here. All these would have been created all out of the same spun sentence up at the top. Ultimately, you can see, though, how if you're doing this kind of thing over and over and over again on a whole bunch of different pages, that content really can't be the star of your page, because you might not even know what a given sentence is going to be saying some of the times, depending on the different replacements that you give it. So I do think it would be okay to use this for certain situations, but in general, I would be a little hesitant to use this across the board to build all of my content. Unfortunately, because of the way the individual post writing works on just one specific page, you are still going to have to actually do a lot of the website building on the child websites themselves. So your main point in using WP Central Hub is going to be to help to make sure all of your sites are up to date with the current WordPress version by monitoring them up top here, and you can update them either one site at a time or all of your sites together. Managing your software, again, having to do with your plugins and your themes. Obviously, the writing, just like I was describing to you, used in limited manners, though. Maybe on a site-by-site basis, if you were doing basic article posting and blog posts, things that where you did not need to be incorporating special plugin features into those articles and into that content. That could certainly still be done all through this central area here. And then obviously the add users area, where you can create one unified set of login information that will work across all of your websites. Now, one thing I did want to point out, just as a little bit of a warning, if you go into the users list for an individual website, like you see on my screen here, whenever you're going into an individual website setting up at the top here, you can not only add plugins and themes or extra users to these websites in this manner, but you can also edit the existing information that's already there. Well, when you're editing the users of one of your child websites, the plugin actually does give you the capability to completely lock yourself out of it. And that would be done by actually deleting all of your user accounts from that site. If you delete all of your administrator accounts from that website, you won't be able to log into it anymore to make additional changes to it, for example. So do be careful with that. If you were to delete it through here and essentially sever the connection between this site and the other site, then regaining entry to those additional sites could certainly be a little tough. However, I don't think the average person would actually just come in here and delete all of their administrator users. It is okay if you want to delete your administrator user, but only after you have, for example, created a bulk user that would work across all of your different websites. This can also be handy for people that might use outsourcing for article writing or simply to help them manage either all of their websites or a specific set of websites. You can have one employee, for example, assigned to a specific set of websites, and you would go in and create an administrator user for them, but you could only set them up for the specific sites that you actually need them to be able to access. And then they wouldn't have access to your whole central hub. They would just have access to those individual websites that you assign them user information to. So for more complicated uses like that, there are certainly a lot of things that WP Central Hub can do that can help to save you a lot of time and make your life a lot easier. Now, if any of you guys have any questions for me about the plugin, about any of my training I've gone over tonight, or just simply something that you might be wondering about how all of this works, I don't mind at all holding an open question and answer session. If you do have a question, simply type it into the chat box for me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions for you. What about working with clients with this plugin? Rand is asking. Are you referring to as far as like giving them access to particular accounts? I really wouldn't be giving them access to your mother website. Because then obviously they would be able to manage everything. But you could certainly give people access to individual websites using the add user thing, kind of like what I was talking about before with outsourcing, or maybe having an employee that manages particular sites. It could also be clients where perhaps you manage a number of different WordPress sites for your clients. You can then have them install this child theme onto their main website, and by setting it up this way with your parent site, then you could do certain things for them, like making sure all their software is kept up to date, or providing new software for them, or unifying their login information for them, granting access maybe to new employees of theirs that come on board and they need to be able to get their own login information for sites. certain client management services like that should be all kinds of things that could be done. My one thing there would just be to make sure you have the proper licensing rights to do that for WP Central Hub. I've not looked into the specifics of that. I'm not aware exactly of the different licensing rights that are available for it, but I would assume yes, the developer should allow that type of action, or selling it as a service, for example. Jacques is asking about WP installations that are not in active site. Explain how that works. Basically, your parent website right here, like for my site that I'm on, my parent site, if I go to my homepage, this is an actual Amazon website where people can visit, search engines can access this website, and so on and so forth. Well, you can actually set up a website that's essentially hidden, where it's not an active site. If you go to the homepage, there might not be anything there. It might just be the standard WordPress theme saying that it's, like a brand new website or whatever. You could even technically go into your web host, and I wonder if that would work. If you could block access to your site from other people. I can't guarantee that would work, but it's possible. If you were to go into your web host settings and essentially just make a website private to where other people wouldn't be able to access it. At the very least, though, you could just take a new domain name. Let's say you just wanted to set up some kind of short, easy domain for yourself. I could try to go and register ryanssites.com. And I set up a WordPress installation on that site. Then I install my whole software library on that site. Basically, all of my plugins, all of the different themes that I would use across any possible WordPress site that I might set up. And then that site wouldn't have to actually be used as a normal WordPress site. It could just simply be my hub site where I go and log into to have this WP Central Hub that I could then manage the rest of my sites with. So this doesn't have to be an actual active WordPress website that you're using. It could just simply be a site that you set up to be nothing more than your hub. And you would just then install WordPress Central Hub on it, and then all of the other plugins and themes that you would possibly want to have access to in your network here. You're quite welcome, Jacques. I like your idea, Rand, of your service you were thinking about, just to kind of help people update and upgrade and manage their websites, maintenance type of times. I could totally see that being useful to a lot of people, especially people that are just getting into it and they don't want to have to worry about all that extra stuff. Maybe they're just more worried about coming into their site and making a blog post on it, and they don't want to have to worry about everything else. Yeah, I could see that. You get the right people in front of a service like that, and I think they would take it for sure. You're welcome as well, Joan. Glad you enjoyed it all, and not a problem at all on the replay. I will make sure that gets out to you guys a little later this evening, and again, that'll remain up indefinitely for you to access.